Americans think about and prepare for the future. Americans love saving for a rainy day, getting married, buying a home, sending the kids to college, and retiring in comfort. Americans also protect themselves against future misfortunes with varieties of insurance. Jesus' advice to his contemporaries, stay awake and be prepared for an imminent event, belabors the obvious for Americans. However, future events were not so obvious for ancient Middle Eastern peoples. Matthew chapter 24, verses 37 through 44. Jesus said, "For as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Skyvault Man. In days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, up to the day that Noah entered the ark. They did not know until the flood came and carried them all away. So will it be at the coming of the Skyvault Man. 2 men will be out in the field. One will be taken, and one will be left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill. One will be taken, and one will be left. Therefore stay awake, for you do not know on which day your Lord will come. Be sure of this. If the master of the house had known the hour of night when the thief was coming, he would have stayed awake and not let his house be broken into. So too you also must be prepared, for at an hour you do not expect, the Skyvault Man will come." Biblical people shared a present focus. Generally speaking, people throughout the circum-Mediterranean and Middle Eastern cultural worlds are unable and unwilling to think about the future. Only God knows that. And the common belief is that it is futile for humans to try to discover it. Just look at Daniel in the Bible. See how he revises calculations of an upcoming event? Hey Daniel, is it going to happen in 1,290 days? Or maybe 1,335 days? Oh Daniel, you can't seem to get it right, huh? Better just forget it. Reading these revisions in the book we call Daniel may be humorous to us modern readers, but they illustrate very well the viewpoint of our ancient Middle Eastern ancestors. People of that cultural world, the culture of the Bible, lived entirely for the present. The Matthean Jesus chides them for worrying about tomorrow and what they will eat, drink, or wear. He instructs them to ask their patron, the God of Israel, only for today's bread and not a week's supply. The Matthean Jesus is absolutely convinced that this generation, that is his own first century generation, will not pass away until all these things have taken place. Hold up. Wait a minute, Jesus. What happened to your present focus? You told people in the late 20s Common Era to repent. That's present-focused language. And you told people to stay awake. That's present-focused. Do you expect people not to doze off at least once in 50 years? 50 years, which of course is how long after Jesus' ministry the document called Matthew got composed. But then you say, this generation will not pass away before all this has taken place. But it did. We're talking about a span of time that's not just today and tomorrow. It's way beyond the day after that. So the question is, where did this Sunday's Gospel exhortation to stay awake and be watchful for the advent of the Son of Man, the advent of the Skyvault Man, come from? Where did it originate? Did the historical Jesus actually say these words? Or were they placed on his lips by his disciples living decades later?
Sometimes it's easy to make distinctions like that. But I can tell you right now that in most of the 503, it ain't that easy. It's very, very difficult to know when Jesus is talking and when his followers are talking. it's made even more difficult by a theological belief.
Consider the present frustration of Jesus' followers. Scholars point out that Jesus frequently proposed behaviors alternative to those favored by his culture. While Jesus was not countercultural, he certainly was counterstructural. Obsessive and narrow focus on the present can cause a person to miss events just around the corner, which are also present but slightly delayed. By the time the anonymous author we call Matthew compiled his gospel, sometime around 80 to 85 Common Era, Jesus had been dead and risen nearly 50 years. About 10 to 15 years prior to Matthew's composition, the failed revolt of the Judeans resulted in the utter demolition of their temple by Titus and the Roman legions. 70 Common Era. Still, the celestial sky vault man, whom many messianists began to identify with Jesus, by the way, the historical Jesus never did that, folks, had not yet arrived. And many of Jesus' original listeners had already died. Messianists, the first century followers of Jesus we anachronistically called New Testament Christians, were frightened, folks. They were becoming impatient. The Matthean Jesus group was further agitated by its vocal Judean opponents. They taunted the Messianists. It ran something like this. Hey, followers of the way, where is your coming sky vault man? You keep saying it's going to happen in this generation, but you were all deceived. What's wrong with you people? Are you stupid? Don't you remember Daniel? He was unable to calculate and predict also. You guys are similarly misguided. Give it up, dummies! With that in mind, let's consider hope for a brighter tomorrow. For this Advent Sunday's Gospel reading, the author we call Matthew has borrowed and redirected parables from his source, Mark chapter 13, so as to console and instruct his beleaguered community. The Son of Man Jesus gave his word. He definitely will return. But no one can calculate the exact time because his coming will be unexpected. Just like the flood was for Noah's contemporaries. And for this reason, the believer must be ever watchful. The parables about the two in the field and the two grinding give no clue as to which will be taken and which will remain. Each person must be vigilant, like the good homeowner, wary of thieves and vandals. Each believer must be ever prepared for the Lord's sudden return. For our present-oriented ancestors in the faith, the ongoing refusal of Jesus' expected imminent return forced them to think future. After the parousia of Jesus did not materialize for 50 years and more in the Matthean Jesus group, the anonymous evangelist tradition names Matthew was able to force his present-oriented people to begin to think of at least a slightly remote, if not yet very far off, future time. The challenge to American believers living in the 21st century is quite different. We Americans and other 21st century Westerners are so terminally future-oriented, often to a distant future, college for the infant or retirement for the new worker, that we frequently miss the present altogether. Our digital watch with no second hand and our computer that operates by nanoseconds reinforces our Western sense of a fleeting, practically non-existent present moment. With our futures relatively well secured, we Western people need to be wakeful to and watchful of the present, lest misfortune creep up on us before we realize it.